Hi everyone, welcome back to Musing Moms. And today on our podcast we have Mr. Ronan O'Carroll from the Emphasis English Academy. And I'm going to put Ronan in the hot seat today to talk to us about choosing the right school for your children. I think a lot of parents, we worry about sending our kids to the right school. One of the things that I want to start with, I think, Ronan, you probably know that for us in Malaysia, if you go to a national government school, you're not actually able to choose your school.
Yeah.
But at the same time, having said that, a lot of parents also do choose to send their children to international school.
Yeah.
How do you differentiate between sending to the right school or like a private school? Because I think like a lot of people think sending their kids to like a private international school is better than attending like a national government school.
I think it depends on your objectives.
Right.
So you've got to think about what you want for your children first. And so one of the advantages of international schools is that the kids get a very high level of English.
Okay.
Right, they're doing classes in English every day and they're expected to be able to use English as a native speaker. But they don't have to go to international schools to master English.
Yeah.
Right. And so for Malaysian kids, they need more than one language.
Yeah.
Right. People like me who only speak one language, we have a disadvantage in Malaysia. So for most Malaysian parents, they want their kids to speak 2, 3, 4 languages sometimes.
I think, that's what they call the kiasu culture,
Yeah. So it's my wife can speak 4 languages. It's not unusual here. When we go back to Ireland, everybody's amazed that she can speak 4 languages. So it's from a language point of view, you've got to think about that. And so whether if you want your kids to have a very high level of Chinese or Malay, then they're maybe not going to get that from an international school. And so that's one of the disadvantages of sending your kids to international schools. But it depends on the objectives, really.
So when you say the objectives, what would you recommend other objective parents look out for other than language, when choosing a school?
A language background, so that's kind of how I look at things. So, for my own kids, I want them to be able to speak more than one language.
Okay.
So as a parent, I'm looking at, how do I get my kids to be fluent in English and Chinese and Malay, right? If they're going to stay here in Malaysia, then they need at least 3 languages, right? So I've got to find a way of doing that. And so we send our kids to Chinese schools. They also come to Emphasis for classes after school, and so they're getting the English and Chinese. We speak English. I speak English with my kids at home. My wife speaks Chinese with them. So they're getting both of those languages, and then they're learning Malay as well. But their Malay is not as strong.
Yeah. Don't worry, Ronan. I think we Malaysians today have quite a disassociation as well, because some of us are really well versed in English instead of our national language, and then you have another half that aren't doing really well in English but are acing their Malay. I think I sort of credit this to us having a lot of YouTube access and internet and a lot of new TV shows that come on where kids pick up the language from TV.
They can, yeah, it definitely helps. And it's something that's very different about Malaysia compared to Japan or Korea, where people are learning English, but it's academic. Yeah. So they learn it in the classroom, but there's no practice.
Yeah. So I think here is a bit like the opposite.
Here's the opposite, yeah. Well, that's one of the great things about Malaysia, is that people can learn lots of different languages. Because there is Malay in everyday use, there's Tamil in everyday use, Mandarin, Cantonese, Hokkien, Hakka, English. And so you can pick up a lot of different languages and practice those languages and get exposed to those languages. And so it's much easier for Malaysians to learn a second or third or fourth language compared to in other places. So when I was in school, we learned German as a foreign language.
Yes.
But it's all in the book and there's no practice. And as soon as you leave the classroom,
there's
no more German. So it's just like one step forward, one step back, one step forward, one step back. And so I never really made that much progress in German until I went to Germany, where
and then you learn from being in Germany.
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, since that you have a more language skewed background, let's go that way. Let's talk about, when you say like the objective of parents when they want their kids to speak better English, choosing a school that, for you, what does it mean when you want to choose a school that teaches language, especially with English? What should parents look for when they're choosing a school that teaches languages?
In a school, so I guess a lot of parents, like we talked about before, don't have a choice,
Yeah.
and so they'll send their kids to the school that's assigned to them.
Yeah.
But if they are choosing a school, then looking at it from a language point of view, it's important to go to the school and meet the teachers and assess the curriculum and talk to the other parents that are sending their kids there, and so try to get a better feel for how that school is doing. Some parents will want to focus more on science or sports or maths, things like that, and so when you're looking at it from those kind of categories, you've got to look at the school and talk to the teachers, go to the school, talk about the curriculum. If you're very interested in science for your kids, then you probably have some kind of a science background or a good understanding of science. So it's important to assess the curriculum, talk to the teachers. There are forums out there. You go on the forums and ask what's the school like, and you'll get a lot of feedback from.
I think nowadays with the access to the forums and the internet, people really can get a lot of reviews on schools. Yeah. When it comes to your academy, what is the highlight that people need to know about when you're studying English at your place? What is the difference? What is the importance of studying English, I think? I mean, to be quite frank, I have this one question that's toying in my head. I mean, is it really relevant right now to have an academy like this in Malaysia?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
And why? Why so? If you say absolutely, why so?
So, English is a very fundamental skill that everybody needs for the modern world, right? So in Malaysia we have people who speak lots of different languages at home, but everybody wants their kids to be successful in life. Everybody wants their kids to grow up and get a good job and to be able to travel overseas freely and to be able to express themselves very clearly. And English is the key to that. So it's great if you can speak 2 languages or 3 languages or 4 languages, but I think the priority for most parents nowadays is English. They want their kids to be able to speak English, just like you want your kids to be able to speak English as a priority. And so at Emphasis, we teach kids to be able to speak English fluently. And so there's a lot of practice of speaking English. It's very different from the old-fashioned kind of school model of the teacher talks and the students listen. And the students are quiet for the duration of the lesson and then they leave and they're expected to be able to speak English. So at Emphasis, it's very interactive. We get the kids to practice English a lot. They get a lot of different games and activities that we use to get them to speak English, to develop their confidence. So when they leave the classroom, they have practice of speaking English and they feel confident to go out and use it in the real world.
Okay. What sort of expectations do you see when parents come and send their kids to like your English academy? Do they come to you and say, Ronan, by the end of this, he needs to be able to write a book in English, or I want him to be the next William Shakespeare, or what are the expectations? I mean, trust me, Asian parents all have expectations.
Sure.
So what I'm trying to get is like, what are they asking you for?
So if somebody came to me and asked to make their kid into the next William Shakespeare, I'd have to lower their expectations a little bit. But I think most of the parents that send their kids to us are professional parents. They're people who use English every day in their jobs, and their English is not always 100%. So they got to 85% or 90%, and it's that last 10% that they find the most difficult bit. And as a working parent, it's very difficult to find the time to take lessons after work, things like that. So they want something better for their kids, and so they send them to Emphasis so that they become fluent in English from a young age. So that English.
What's the age group of children that come to you actually?
Our focus is on preschool and primary school students.
Okay.
So we start with kids from 4. They learn the sounds of the alphabet. They learn to form the letters. They learn to make simple sentences.
How do you differentiate yourself from a normal tuition center? You mentioned just now that, it's more verbal and you do the speaking and all that. I'm assuming that your price range is also very different
Sure.
from the usual tuition center. So what's your, I guess, there's no other way to say it, but key selling point that, that differentiates you from me sending my child to a normal English tuition class?
So what we do is very different from the tuition centers. It's a completely different thing.
Mm-hmm.
So for parents who just want their kids to pass the next exam,
Mm-hmm.
the kids who are failing in school,
Mm-hmm.
then tuition centers absolutely the place to go.
Okay.
Right? If your kid is failing and the exam is in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
send them to a tuition center.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
So for us, we take a much more long-term
Okay.
approach. We want our kids to be fluent in English. That's the target. We want them to be able to speak English like me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a long-term approach. We want them to start when they're 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So they start with preschool level 1, and then they'll progress through the levels, going up to level 6 for school children. And by the time they've finished primary school, they will have mastered English.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want them to be fluent in English. It's not a short-term solution. That
Okay.
We're not targeting on just past the
Grades
exam.
and yeah.
So we're not focused on the Malaysian school curriculum. We have our own curriculum that is specifically designed for Malaysian kids
Mm-hmm.
and the difficulties that Malaysian kids have in
Like what?
mastering English.
What would you say are the difficulties?
Grammar, tenses.
Okay.
Definitely something that a
Mhm.
lot of Malaysians struggle with. So
Okay.
I go to school already
Yeah.
is wrong,
Right.
right? And so a lot of kids, they take the English classes in school where they don't always get practice of speaking English.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll go out and they hear the Manglish being
Mhm.
spoken, and they accept that as English.
Mm-hmm.
So when they write in school, that sentence is wrong and it's marked as wrong. So what they're writing and what they're speaking is completely different.
Mm.
And so we've got to be able to teach them correct English from the start. So when we
Okay.
start with 4-year-olds, it's much easier. They
Okay.
learn the right thing from the start.
Right.
So some of the kids, even our preschool kids, will go home and correct their parents. Mommy, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Teacher Ronan said this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So up to what age what age of students do you have?
We have courses for adults. We have courses for business English and conversational English for adults. We teach teenagers as well, but our main focus is on preschool. And primary school.
Ah, okay. All right. One of the things that I notice with my children, and they can speak English as well, it's become sort of natural to converse in English as well. Do you find that children that come, are they always, not being able to converse yet? Or are they already conversing but just not in the right sort of grammar? Is that the right way?
Yeah, and ideally all of our kids would start at 4 with us at preschool.
Yeah,
level,
oh,
but
okay. So that's like they can't even,
always
yeah.
the case, right?
Yeah.
So we have a placement test that we do with the
Okay.
kids. The placement test is free. They can come by any time and take the placement test, and then we can see where their English is at and where their strengths and weaknesses are, and then we'll put them in a class that is for their level.
Ah, okay.
So it's not by age. Like,
Okay.
So
Right.
a lot of
Okay.
the parents will call us and say, do you have classes
Yeah.
for 8-year-olds?
Yeah.
And we say, yes, we do, but they
okay.
need to do a placement test.
Okay.
So in Malaysia, there's no real standard to say that my kid is 8 years old. I can't assume from that your kid has a specific level
Right.
of English, right? Some kids are very strong. Maybe your kids are at that age and they're speaking English very fluently. Other kids, it's their first time really learning English. If they didn't learn English properly at kindergarten, then they'll start standard 1 with no idea what's going on in English class and fall behind very badly. And so we have to give them the placement test first and put them in classes according to their level of English.
Okay. So you're based on levels rather
Yes.
than age.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Let me just get this right before I know I asked already the importance of English and why you feel English is. How do you see the level of English progressing throughout the years in Malaysia? How long have you lived in Malaysia?
I've been here for 16 years.
Wow. Okay, so you definitely can comment on that. How have you seen the English language progress over the years in Malaysia especially?
I haven't seen as much progress as I'd like.
Oh,
I've seen a
really?
lot of progress in our students, and so going back over the years, we have kids who started with us 15 years ago, who are now in university, and they're very fluent in English. They're in the UK and the US and Australia, and they've no problems with the language aspect of studying. But in terms of the general development of Malaysian English, I think it's slower than I'd like to see.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's still the case where in Kuala Lumpur, as a native speaker, I can get by just speaking English. But as soon as I leave Kuala Lumpur, I'm trying to rely on my terrible Malay, and it doesn't work that well.
You're 16 years, you should be able to form some sentences.
So I tend to find I can form a question, but I don't always understand the answer.
Right, okay.
So I make this really awkward question in Malay, and Malaysian people will try to understand me.
Right.
And then they rattle off the answer, and I'm just, oh no, I don't know what you're saying. So maybe my Malay should be better at this point than it is. But,
so you haven't seen quite large progress in the 16 years? Oh, I'm so quite surprised with that.
Yeah. So it's still very similar to what it was in 2003 when I came here. Is that in Kuala Lumpur you have professional people like yourself who can speak English very well. That a lot of people who are working in jobs and they are required to speak English for their job, but it's not quite at the level they'd hope it would be. When the employers are asked what's the number one thing that you're looking for in staff, it's always English. Right? Every year the Star and whatever are publishing these surveys about employers, and the number one thing is always English, that Malaysians need better English skills.
Okay, so thank you, Ronan, for joining me. Nice to meet you.
Thanks,
and hopefully you don't take another 15 years to learn your Bahasa. Thank you so much.